Hi everyone, thanks for visiting my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Carol, the Thrifty Chic Housewife, and I am so glad that you stopped by. I hope that you will consider subscribing, like and share my videos, and follow me on social media. So today we're going to be doing a canning Q&A, as you can tell from the title. But before we get started, I just wanted to have a little channel chat, talk about just a few things. First, I just want to say thank you to all of you who watch, like, subscribe, and share all that good stuff. My channel, I had a great year last year for my channel, had a lot of growth, and I just want you guys to know that I appreciate you all so very much. Your kind comments, your sweet words, all of your encouragement, and I'm just grateful. So I just wanted to say that to you. And then also wanted to remind you, in case you don't know, I've talked about it several times, but in case you missed it or in case you're new, I do have a Facebook group that we started a few months back, Canning with Carol and Friends. And if you are a Facebook user and you love canning and like sharing about canning, we would love to have you join us. So pop on over to Facebook, check out Canning with Carol and Friends, and have some fun with us. There's lots of great stuff going on over there. Such sweet people. I just am so amazed when I read your guys' posts and your comments. I'm amazed at how many sweet, kind, loving people are there gathered in one place, sharing great information, asking questions, and encouraging one another. And I love that. And I appreciate that so very much. I appreciate the fact that for the most part, my group has been drama-free. And I know many of you have made that comment and how much you appreciate that there's no drama that goes on. Everyone's just helpful and kind and caring. And I appreciate that so very much. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about, and if you are in my canning group, you already know about this. About a month ago, month and a half or so, in the group, there was a lot of discussion about getting some merchandise going. So you guys asked for t-shirts, you asked for tea towels, and different things. And so I was able to get some things going for you through Teespring. One of the t-shirts that I have available, I'm wearing today. It says Canning Addict, and then it says hashtag Carol made me do it at the bottom of the t-shirt. For those of you who are not in the canning group, the hashtag was started by all of the lovely people who are in my Facebook group, and they love to add that hashtag to the end of their posts. So it's kind of an inside joke with those of us who are in the group, and I just love it. So anyway, we got some t-shirts. This is the woman's slouchy tee, so you can tell it's pretty loose and roomy, kind of longer sleeved, which I like, hides a multitude of sins, right? But I also have some black t-shirts. This is the unisex t-shirt. This is a large. I'm wearing a medium in the women's slouchy t-shirt, but there are a lot of things to choose from over there. So make sure you pop on over. I will leave a link in the description box for you, and really look around and make sure what you're getting. There are different blends of fabric in the different types of shirts. There's long sleeve shirts, short sleeve shirts, there's unisex and women's fit, both. So make sure you know exactly what you're ordering and the fit of it. So Teespring has been great. Everything is taken care of through them. So you order through them, you pay them, and all that. None of that is done through me. But I will leave a link. It's really easy to find my Teespring store. We've got lots of things going on over there. I also have mugs, which are super cute. So take a look at those if you need a new mug to add to your mug collection for your coffee or your tea or your hot cocoa. It's really cute and fun to have. So if this goes over well, I will be adding some more things. You all seem to have enjoyed it so far, but I haven't really made much of an announcement about it on YouTube. As a matter of fact, this is really my first time talking about it on video. So I will leave a link for you in the description box, and you can hop on over and take a look. I also wanted to mention that a number of you have also requested aprons and tea towels. I have not been able to get my hands on that type of merchandise. Teespring does not offer that, but I am researching it because I know there are a number of you who are interested. So I will continue to pursue that as well. One other thing I did want to mention, forgot about this. For those of you who want to track your canning, I found this canning journal on Amazon, and I will leave a link in the description box for you. This is a great way to keep track of the things that you can and how much of it you canned, and you can make notes about the recipe you used and how it turned out, and if there were any changes that you would make. It's a really nice journal to have. I know lots of people use them. I looked at several ones and decided that this is the one I'm going to use this year, so I will leave a link to it as well. It's pretty generic, and you can put, there's a place for table of contents and then each individual recipe as you can it up. So I will leave a link for you in the description box below. Anyway, let's get down to business on our Q&A for canning. I did put a little post out here on the community tab and also in my canning Facebook group requesting your questions. So I've kind of compiled a list. They are not in any particular order. So I'm just going to go down my list as you guys asked them, and I jotted them down, and hopefully we'll be able to help you out with the questions that you have. All right, the first question is, how do you check your seal? Okay, so when you take a jar of your food that you've canned off of your shelf, we want to make sure that it's safe, right? So there are a couple things that you need to do, about 3 things that you should look for to make sure that you have an intact seal. So the first thing is, just looking at it, you want to press down in the center of it, and it should not move at all. So just make sure it's not flexing up and down. That's the first way. The other thing that you want to do is, I always lift it by the lid. You should be able to hold your jar by the lid and the seal will hold. And then when you go to open your jar, you should hear a sound. I'm not sure how to describe the sound, but I'm going to open it for you so you can hear it. So you can actually hear the seal breaking. I don't know if that was loud enough for you or not for you to hear it, but you should be able to hear the seal break. So those are the 3 things to look for. And if all 3 of those things happen, then you're good to go. There are no worries about the safety of your food inside of your jar. Okay, next question. Can you pressure can pints and quarts together? The answer to that is yes and no. Most of the time, no, you cannot. Most of the time, your processing times are different for pints and quarts. There are a very small number of recipes or things that you can where the canning time will be the same. So most of the time, no. Occasionally it is possible to do it and still be safe. The other way that you can them together is if you can always go down in size. So if you wanted to add some pint jars to your quart jars of whatever it is you're canning, you can do that. You just have to can for the quart size processing time, if that makes sense. I hope that's not confusing. So if you want to mix them, you can can them, but you have to can them for the longest canning time of whichever size you're canning. I know a lot of people, especially empty nesters or people who are living alone, they like to can in 1/2 pint jars, and there really aren't a lot of times out there besides jams and jellies for canning in those size jars. So they always use the processing time for pint jars and just process in the smaller 1/2 pint jars. It's totally fine to do that, but you cannot use the processing time for pints and add quarts to your canning session. You can never size up. It's always safe to go down. Just know that if you go down in size, the smaller jars are going to they can become over processed. So it's not a practice that I recommend doing. I always try to follow the processing times that's recommended for whatever it is I'm canning. I tend to not do that. But like I said, there are times when people just want the smaller size jar. They just use the processing time for the larger size. So I hope I didn't. If that was confusing, please let me know in the comments and I'll try to further explain that. Have you ever canned ham? I've never canned ham by itself. I have canned split pea soup with ham and bean soup with ham following a tested recipe. So here's the thing with ham. Ham and cured meats are not technically recommended for canning. The curing process can interfere with the heat penetration of the meat inside of the jar. However, they are safe to use in tested recipes. So for example, Ball has 2 recipes that I can think of off the top of my head, both split pea and ham soup and their ham and bean soup. Those are tested recipes and they do include ham. But there are no safe canning guidelines for just canning ham. It's a cured meat and it's just not recommended for canning. So that's the lowdown on that. If you have further questions about that, leave me a comment. But I think that accurately answers that question. The next question is, can I use a pressure canner to water bath can? The answer to that is yes, you most definitely can. So yes, you can use a pressure canner for water bath canning. The caveat being that you still have to be able to put enough water in your canner to cover your jars by 1 inch. So I couldn't water bath can quart jars in my All-American pressure canner because there's not enough room by the time you put your quart jars in for the water to cover your jars by 1 inch accurately. So it's going to depend on the size of your canner. And the other issue is you don't want to allow any pressure to build. So you definitely do not want to lock down your lid. Some will even leave the lid slightly ajar like that during the water bath canning process so that no pressure builds up. So yes, you can use a pressure canner as a water bath canner. You just have to make sure that your jars are covered by 1 inch of water. Next question, what potatoes do you use when canning? I do have a video specifically about canning potatoes, and I will link that for you. I have used a couple different types of potatoes. I usually use white round potatoes. White round potatoes are different than russet potatoes. Russet potatoes are not really recommended for canning. However, people do can them. So I think there is no type of potato that is unsafe for canning. Some just can better than others. The National Center for Home Food Preservation and Ball both recommend using a waxy potato, and most of the time they talk about using the white round potato. And they are labeled white round potatoes in your grocery store. I know people sometimes have trouble finding them, but they are there. They're usually with the Yukon Gold and the red skin potatoes. Red skin potatoes people have great success with. Yukon Gold potatoes people have great success with, and I have had a number of people have great success with doing russet potatoes. However, because they are a starchy potato, you do want to pre-soak them. My one friend Jen, who turned me on to canning russet potatoes, said that she soaks hers over a number of hours and changes out the water. Some people don't do it several times, don't change out their water several times and still have success. So just know that if you do can russets, it's recommended that you soak them first so that they release some of their starch. The other thing about canning potatoes is you must always peel them. Don't ever can them with the peeling left on. You increase the risk of botulism if you do. So peel your potatoes. Okay, how to prevent siphoning. This is a question I get asked all the time, and it seems to be, it's very common. I just want to say that up front. It is very common. You can do everything right and still experience some siphoning. Siphoning is known as liquid loss from your jars. Some people just describe it as their jars are leaking when they open up their canner. They have whatever is inside of the jar is leaking outside of the jar during the canning process, and you can see remnants of it in the water. It is not anything to panic over. It happens. It's very common, and like I said, you can do everything right and it can still happen. So I did pull up an article. I wanted to read a few things to you, and I will link this article for you. This is from healthycanning.com. They are a trusted source, and they have great articles, you guys, on just about anything and everything with canning. So they are a great resource to use when you have questions. So they went down the whole list of reasons. The top reason is fluctuating pressure in your canner during the canning process. So it's really important that you don't have huge temperature changes while you're canning. So once you bring your canner up to pressure and you start timing, you don't really want to mess with the heat a whole lot. You want your heat to be just hot enough to maintain the pressure in your canner. So you don't want it on high all the time, and you don't want to turn it down too low, and you don't want to decrease your heat too quickly. And I always state in my canning videos, for those of you who have seen my canning videos, I always say, once you get up to pressure, slowly reduce your heat to just maintain the pressure that's in your canner. So don't change the temperature in your canner too quickly. And they go into more detail. The second reason is improper cool down procedure. Cooling jars too quickly after processing can cause liquid loss. After a pressure canner has returned to absolutely zero, make sure you are really at zero. You remove your weight and let your canner rest for 5 to 10 minutes. There are differing opinions on if it should be 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I always wait 10 minutes. That's always what I say in my videos. Then remove your lid, and then you should wait an additional at least 10 minutes. So you want to make sure you're using the correct cool down procedure and not trying to do that too quickly. The other thing I want to mention here is also you don't want to leave your jars in your canner too long for an extended period of time, because something called flat sour can happen and your food can go bad. So just about 10-15 minutes. I know some people walk away and forget. Don't let your jars sit in the canning water for hours afterward. Try to remove them within 10 to 30 minutes. The third reason is hidden air in the jar. That's why we debubble. So if you do not debubble after filling your jars, that can also be a cause of liquid loss from your jar. They go on to give great detail about that. I'm not going to read all that. But air in your jar can cause it, so make sure that you debubble and you use the correct headspace. The fourth reason is lid-related causes. Reusing previously used canning lids. We know you shouldn't do that. They should only be used one time unless you're using Tatler or Harvest Guard lids. Those are different, and those are made to be reused, but the regular metal lids, the two-piece lids, should only be used one time. Not wiping the jar rims before putting the bands on, before you placing your lids and then putting the bands on. You always want to make sure that you have a clean surface for the lid to adhere to on the jar, so make sure you're wiping that down. I always dip a paper towel in white vinegar to clean that off really well. And also the canning ring bands are too loose, allowing too much venting. That will also lead to siphoning. So those are just a few things to look for. And then I like this last part, it just reiterates what I said when I started talking about this topic, and it seems that there's one more reason not listed in the above reasons from the experts, which is phase of the moon. It can sometimes just occur when you will swear you have done everything right forwards and backwards. And I have experienced it myself, made sure I did everything right, and I still have experienced some siphoning. So it does happen. It's very common, nothing to panic over. And as long as you have not lost more than half of the liquid in your jar, there's nothing to be concerned with. I do want to, however, point out that any food that is above the liquid in your jar can discolor. It probably will discolor. The longer it sits on the shelf, the greater the chance of it changing color. It does not mean that your food is unsafe. It's still totally fine to eat, but it may not look as good as what is below the liquid. So just be aware of that. Okay, this question, somebody asked, how hot is your water for prepping your jars? For those of you who have watched my videos, you know that I talk about keeping my jars hot in a sink full of hot water. I just use hot tap water. I don't know the temperature. I've never measured it. I just turn my faucet on as hot as the water will go and fill my sink. I will say our water heater is turned up pretty high, so it is very hot water, but it doesn't really matter how hot your water is. You just want to start with a hot jar if that's the method you are using for keeping your jars hot. Some people use their dishwasher to keep their jars hot. Some people keep them in their canner as they're prepping, they heat the water in the bottom of their canner, and they keep their jars in there to keep them warm as they fill them. Either of those methods are fine. There's not really a set temperature they need to be. You just want to start with a hot jar. The idea being you want to avoid thermal shock. So say you are canning up soup and the directions are to bring the soup to a boil and then put it in your jars. You don't ever want to put boiling soup in a cold jar, or you run the risk of thermal shock and your jar can crack. So you're just trying to avoid the thermal shock, which can cause your jar to break. Using jars in your oven, yay or nay. Ball states that their jars are not meant to be used in the oven. So I don't recommend that. They are designed specifically for canning. Oven heat is a dry heat, which is different than the heat that they are getting inside of your canner because they're in water. So that type of heat is different, and they're not meant to withstand a dry heat. So using them in the oven is not a good idea and not something that I recommend. Okay, the next question is, how do I keep my rings from tarnishing? I don't have a good answer for that. They are eventually going to tarnish and they will eventually rust. To be honest with you, I usually just toss them when they start looking yucky. However, when I remove them from my jars, which you should remove them from your jars before you store your jars, I just clean them, wash them in hot soapy water, rinse them really well, and then make sure they're dry. I guess the main way to keep them from getting yucky is making sure that they're clean and dry. Don't store them wet. And that should help, but eventually they are going to tarnish and they will rust a little bit too. So I just toss them. You always get new ones when you buy new jars, so I always have plenty. So I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer for that. I just keep them clean and dry. Can you pressure can in an Instant Pot? And the answer is no. We've been asked this a number of times, and I know no one likes this answer when I say it, but right now, the experts do not recommend that you use an Instant Pot or any type of pressure cooker to pressure can. So when you're canning, make sure that you are using an approved appliance that is for pressure canning specifically. There's even some controversy over, there are 2 electric pressure canners on the market that say that they are suitable for pressure canning. However, they have not been tested or approved by the USDA at this time. And they have no plans in the near future to test those for safety. So, but I do know that the companies do state that they've done their own research and they say that they're safe, but there is some controversy over that as well. Can I make a DIY steam canner? My answer to that is no, please don't. You guys have seen, if you've watched my channel very much, you know that I have the Victorio multi-use steam canner, and I absolutely love it. I don't even really water bath can anymore. Steam canning is my go-to. And I know it is also a water bath canner, so I know everyone thinks I already have this big pot for water bath canning. Why do I need to buy another canner that is for pressure canning? Can I rig it so that I can use it for steam canning? And my answer is going to be no. I do not recommend that you do that, because this canner is made specifically for steam canning, and part of steam canning is you have to have vents where the steam can come out. My lid has 2 holes in it where steam is released. When you are using just a plain water bath canner or just a plain stock pot for water bath canning, you don't have that. So I don't recommend doing that. The other question that I got that went along with that is, what is the temperature inside the canner when you're steam canning? For your food, for it to be considered safe steam canning, the temperature must be between 210 and 212 degrees. And I've used an instant read thermometer in my steam vents just to check, and yes, the temperature is always, for the whole processing time, is always between 210 and 212 degrees. So I don't know how you would do that with just a water bath canner or a stock pot, so I do not recommend that you try to make your own steamed canner. Can you do bigger chunks of chicken than the recipe calls for? Yes, you can. And I have research to back that up. If you look on the National Center for Home Food Preservation under selecting, preparing, and canning meat, chicken and rabbit is prepared the same way. Okay, it states, cut the chicken or rabbit into suitable size parts for fitting into your jars, leaving required headspace. So I wouldn't do humongous chunks, but they say just suitable size parts for fitting into your jars. So if you're canning a recipe that calls for your chicken to be cut in 1-inch cubes or 1/2-inch cubes, you can certainly cut them bigger and still be safe. How do I fill my canner, the empty space in my canner, if the recipe that I'm using is not enough to fill my canner? You can always can water if you want to, or you could can another recipe that is canned for the same time. For example, if you're doing a small batch of soup, if there's another soup that has the same processing time, you could do 2 different types of soup to fill your canner. But lots of people will just fill the empty space with jars of water, and then they have canned water for their shelf. The next question I get asked frequently is about sugar substitutes. Lots of people have issues with diabetes, or they're just trying to cut back on their calories. And I will link an article for you regarding this. You can safely use a sugar substitute in canning as long as it is a substitute that is measured cup for cup for sugar. So I think most of the time it's Splenda that is used. I'm sorry, I don't use sugar substitutes, so I'm not well versed in all the ones that are out there, but I do know Splenda is approved to be used. The other thing I want to mention here is you do not have to can with sugar. You can leave the sugar out of recipes. Just know that obviously it's going to change the flavor. So specifically, I was asked about my sweet potatoes. I canned those in a brown sugar syrup, but you don't have to do that. You can can the sweet potatoes and just use water. So you can totally leave the sugar out. Or, like I said, it's safe to use a sugar substitute as long as it's something that you sub cup for sugar. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about briefly, this is not really a question, I think, but I do think that this is helpful information, especially for those of you who are new. My friend Beth reminded me of this morning in our Facebook group. Headspace. Lots of people have questions about how to properly measure headspace. Now, if you have a debubbling tool, it has the little notches that help you to accurately measure headspace. But in the this is the Blue book, there is a diagram for using your jar for measuring. I hope you can see that okay. You can use the threads on your jar for measuring. So, for example, this bottom thread, that is 1 inch. The middle thread is 1/2 inch headspace. And the top thread is 1/4 inch headspace. So that's an easy way, and that's usually, in all honesty, that's usually the method that I use for measuring my headspace accurately. But the debubbling tool works well also. One more thing before we go, because I've been asked about this too and I forgot to write it down. If you have the All-American canner, many people have asked, especially those of you who are new, there are instructions that come with your canner that talk about using Vaseline on the sides of your lid and on the inside of your pot. You should do that. I do not do that every time. I can't remember what the instructions say, but I don't think it's recommended that it's not stated that you have to do it every time. It's going to depend on how often you do your canning. So I do mine when I feel like it needs it 3 or 4 times a year, probably. Every few months I will do it, and that works great for me. But you just take a very, very small layer of petroleum jelly and just wipe it on the outside, go all the way around the outside of the lid, and also on the inside of your pot, put a thin layer of it there as well. Don't overdo it. When I say thin layer, I mean really thin layer. You don't need much at all. The other question with that is, can I just use cooking oil? Cooking oil, you can technically use it, but it's not recommended because cooking oil tends to get sticky as you heat it and the temperature changes and all that. So cooking oil is not a good idea if you don't want it to be sticky. Petroleum jelly works fantastically. I usually just keep a teeny tiny jar of petroleum jelly with my canner, and then when I need to do that, I do that. But like I said, you don't have to do it very often, but it just depends on how often you use your canner, so you'll have to use your own discretion on that. So anyway, that wraps up today's canning Q&A. I hope you guys enjoyed coming along with me. I hope I answered your questions. If you have other questions or I need to further explain something, please feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section. Make sure to stop by my Teespring store and get yourself some cool merchandise. I think that that's so fun. Anyway, you guys are awesome. I appreciate you all more than you can possibly know. You have definitely helped keep me sane with everything that's been going on, and you are just precious to me, and I want you to know that. So thanks again for joining me. Have a great day, and I will see you next time.